I'd like to move now to the governor's candidates. I will, for that portion of the forum, Senator Duff will moderate, perhaps maybe say a few words ahead of time. And I do have a list of candidates here that I wrote down in the order that I was going through my resume, so they're in no particular order. Senator Duff.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. What a great crowd. And thank you to all the candidates for being here. Back in 1994, I had the opportunity to drive John Larson around when he was running for governor. He was the Senate president pro tem at the time, and so seeing all these candidates in one spot at one time kind of brings me back to those days of driving John Larson around and understanding how there are lots of candidates, lots of decisions, and lots of questions. I think for us anyway, we're very fortunate in Connecticut that we have lots of good candidates who are looking to run for elective office in the state of Connecticut. People here are excited, they're passionate, they are motivated, and they want to help move the state of Connecticut in the right direction. So I think we ought to just give all the candidates a round of applause for putting themselves out there and for being. They've got to go to 169 town committees. That's a lot of town committees for a little state, so we certainly appreciate all their work. The question, I think, and I'm going to certainly let all the candidates say their piece, but the question that we have to consider is what state are we and what kind of a state do we want to become? And we have to think about some of the issues for us that are extremely important, especially as a lot of us fight against some of the things that we're seeing in Washington, D.C. So for us anyway, in the legislature, we have to have a governor that we can work with, that we can move policy forward. It's extremely important that we continue to elect another Democratic governor here in the state of Connecticut. The last thing we want to do is move backwards with all the progress that we've made. So whether we've made a lot of progress on criminal justice reform, we've made a lot of progress on growing jobs in the state, we've made a lot of progress on our education funding reform, made a lot of progress on a number of issues, but we have to still continue to go. Our legislative session opens this February, and we have a very small amount of time to actually get a lot of stuff done. And right now we're challenged because we have an 18-18 Senate. We need a Senate that has a strong Democratic majority. We need a House that has a strong Democratic majority, and we need a top of the ticket that is going to help carry that and bring us these strong Democratic majorities. Some of the issues that we're going to be talking about is paid family medical leave. That's going to be Senate Bill 1, and we're going to make sure we have a vote on that in the Senate this year because that issue is so extremely important to us. I'm pushing back on some of the net neutrality. That's going to be Senate Bill 2, something that I'm going to be working on because that is important to us to make sure that we don't have the federal government tell us what we can and cannot do on net neutrality. So the range of issues that the governors have to face are huge. And we have very, very qualified people who are running for governor this year. And I know that there's going to be lots of questions. But as whatever happens at the convention or the primary, we have to make sure that as a party we come together and we support our Democratic governor, our Democratic candidate for governor, because we've seen what's going on the other side of the aisle. And let me tell you, those folks, just like some of the folks in the legislature on the other side of the aisle, are presenting very extreme ideas about what they think about what we should be doing in the state. So as Mayor Knopp said, and somebody else said on Attorney Kendall said about some issues on different things that were in the budget, those weren't issues that the Senate Democratic Caucus were pushing or the House Democratic Caucus were pushing. Those were ideas from the other side. So if you don't even like those ideas, imagine what would happen if they were really in charge. So it's important that we come together, we stick together, and that we keep electing Democrats here in the state of Connecticut. So with that, let's bring up Dita Bhargava and have her come up and speak for 5 minutes. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator. Thank you all for being here today. I'm Dita Bhargava, and I'm exploring a run for governor because I believe in this great state of Connecticut and its future. But I think, like many of you here, I do also believe that the status quo has not been working and that it's time for new ideas and innovative leadership. The Republicans are focused on Connecticut and they want to flip it. We can't let that happen. There's way too much at stake. I'm a different type of Democrat because of my life story, my professional work experience, and my pro-business progressive stance. I know that Connecticut has some challenges, economic challenges, and I have a vision that will create economic growth and well-paying jobs from middle-class and working-class families while continuing to build on all our great progressive values by passing policies like paid family leave, like equal pay, and affordable access to health care for all. My mother was a single immigrant parent of 3, and she's here tonight still being a mom. She struggled to provide. She struggled to provide my sisters and I with basic necessities, but my mother told us 3 things every day of our life: to educate ourselves, to always strive to reach our full potential, and to never forget our humble roots. And I carried my mom's words throughout my life and broke barriers. Like in school, I was the only female drummer. From then I went on to study electrical and computer engineering, and then had a very successful 20-year career in the cutthroat and male-dominated industry of finance. Now, I have spoken to businesses, small and large, across our state, and a few challenges they all tell me about. One is the pipeline of talent. Our young folks are leaving in big numbers. One of the first things that I'd like to introduce is a public-private partnership where if a college graduate commits to work and stay in Connecticut for 5 years, that their loan is forgiven. Another challenge that business and families face is the lack of investment in infrastructure and transportation. We need to implement tolls. It creates about $1 billion of revenue per year, and we need to put it right back into our transportation. Lastly, young folks and retired folks these days want convenient urban living. We need strong cities with affordable housing, better schools, and better intercity transit. I'm a different type of Democrat with the vision and the experience to put our state back on track. The Republican Governor Association has been consistently targeting me because they fear my type of candidacy. They can't tie me to failed policies of the past, and because of my pro-business progressive vision. 20 years ago, businesses and families would flock to our state, and I know we can be that vibrant and attractive state again because all our great assets are still here. Great geography, educational institutions, and a highly skilled workforce. I need your support, and I promise to work hard for this beautiful state that we live in. Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah, I had asked earlier about mass incarceration. That is also interested in criminal justice reform. There's a lot of inequality in it. As governor, are there any ideas you might have that might help make that better in our state?
Well, first of all, I am very proud of our state for passing the Second Chance Society. I think we need to move more into that direction. I'm a huge believer in diversity. I think certainly amongst our police force, the more diverse of a force that we can have, I think the better that these police officers can actually integrate in our communities, the stronger sort of the resistance we would have against that type of unfair treatment of some of our offenders. But really, I think Connecticut should be proud for some of the steps that it has taken, and I certainly would want to build on those legacy policies that we do have. Yeah.
Anyone else?
Yes.
So, Amazon is perhaps the clearest and most recent example of businesses holding states hostage for tax breaks and economic and financial perks. Do you think Connecticut can avoid falling into that situation, or is it inevitable, and what other steps would you take to continue to attract businesses?
Well, thank you. That's a great question. So, like I said, I have talked to many businesses, small and large, and I can tell you, well, we all know this, that a lot of businesses are leaving our state, namely GE, UBS, Alexion, Aetna almost, to other high tax states. So it's not about taxes necessarily. It's about the ecosystem. We have to have better relationships between government, private sector, and our universities. So I want to make sure that we, like the three-tier plan that I had mentioned, we need strong pipeline of students, right? That's why I have that initiative of the public-private partnership. We need to invest in our infrastructure and transportation. Now, these are the things that businesses are telling me. The other thing, I sat on a roundtable with GE. It was called something like, "Gee whiz, why did GE leave our state?" But one of the things that they mentioned is that they're a multinational corporation. We all small and large businesses, a lot of them are global now. We have a global economy. And their challenge was trying to get to an airport that was 2 hours away, often JFK. So I would like to engage in public-private partnerships, namely trying to expand Bradley Airport to connect our state to the rest of the country and the rest of the world. Imagine the amount of businesses that would flock to our state if we could actually give them that connectivity. And to that matter, I would like to move towards creating an infrastructure bank for those type of projects so that we can make our state attractive for businesses and for our families.
Okay, I think that's it. That's all the time we have.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you so much.
Next on the list is Mayor Luke Bronin, who I saw just walk in.
Good evening, everyone. It's great to be with you. Thank you for hosting this tonight and inviting us down. I'm Luke Bronin, the mayor of the city of Hartford. I'm going to tell you a little bit about who I am and why I'm here tonight. I'm a dad. I've got 3 little kids, 8, 6, and 4. My wife, Sarah, and I moved up to Hartford from New Haven about a dozen years ago. Hopefully my kids are going to sleep easily right now, or we're going to be in trouble again tonight. I'm a veteran. When I was in law school, I signed up the U.S. Navy because it seemed to me that the burden was being too narrowly shared, and I ended up serving as an intel officer in Afghanistan. I served in the Obama administration for the first 4 years. I was part of the Obama Treasury Department, was part of the team that pushed through the Wall Street Reform and Consumer Financial Protection Bill, the bill that established the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau that Donald Trump is now trying to dismantle. And as chief legal counsel to the governor, I had the chance to be part of the team that helped push through the common sense gun reforms that were enacted after Sandy Hook to set the goal and set the path for getting Connecticut to be the first state in the country to be designated as having ended chronic veterans homelessness, and to be part of the team that laid the groundwork for the Second Chance Society, the criminal justice reforms that I've been passionate about since the time I was teaching and tutoring in the Whaley Avenue jail up in New Haven. And as mayor, I've had to confront an unprecedented fiscal crisis in our city, and to do it honestly and transparently, to be unafraid of making hard decisions, and to build partnerships that a lot of people didn't think were possible. What I take from all of those things is really gets to what the heart of being a Democrat means, which is recognizing the power of government to make change when it is filled with people who are not just the best and the brightest, but who care and who recognize the transformation that we can make in people's lives and in communities through government. And the reason that I'm here as part of this field tonight is because I believe that our state's at a crossroads. Yeah, we face serious fiscal challenges that we have to deal with transparently and boldly. And at the same time, we've got to lay out the path to growth. And I hope we get to talk about this in the Q&A on transportation and job creation and the importance of having strong, vibrant cities at the hub of our regions. But I also think that as much as at stake for our local communities around the state, big and small, and as much as at stake for our state, this election in Connecticut is also about our country. And as mayor, I've been proud to stand up to Donald Trump as he's bullied sanctuary cities. I've been proud to pass and to push for ordinances that protected a woman's right to choose, even as the Trump administration was defunding Planned Parenthood, and today pushing for this arbitrary and vindictive 20-week abortion ban. I've been proud to stand up on issues like teen pregnancy or the importance of preserving the Obamacare Act and extending affordable health care. And I think what we need in the state of Connecticut right now is somebody who's not afraid to make tough decisions, and who's not just talking about change, but has shown a willingness to make change. And somebody who isn't just talking about standing up to Donald Trump, but's been doing it for the last couple of years. I hope to earn your support, and I look forward to the conversation and the questions tonight. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mayor. right, questions for Mayor Bronin? Yes.
Hi. The Trump administration.
Can you speak up? I'm sorry.
Sorry about that. The Trump administration has passed some sweeping tax reform,
Yeah.
which will hit us where it hurts in the state of Connecticut with our state deductions. Is there anything that you would do as governor to help try to offset that or compensate for it?
Sure. You know, it's a terrible bill. It obviously puts a target on the backs of states like Connecticut, middle class in general, and blue states. You know, I think we have to look around at the experiments that are being talked about. There's some that don't make a lot of sense to me. There's one possibility of converting some of our income tax to payroll tax, which would get around that. But I think we're going to have to see what the effects of that bill are, and we're going to have to be open to a pretty broad restructuring of our tax code to deal with it, because it is a massive hit. You know, it is the equivalent of, you know, a 20 or 30% income tax hike on a lot of residents in our state. And so we're going to have to be open to some bigger tax reform. I do think, aside from that, we have to be open to some bigger tax reform anyway, because, you know, we are far too reliant on the property tax to fund our local communities. That's something we've been talking about for decades, and maybe this is an opportunity to do that kind of ground-up reform of our tax code.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Cannabis legalization?
That's a new question.
I'm for it. I've been for it since long before this election. I'm for it not just because of the revenue. I mean, the truth is, I don't think it's going to. That's not the answer to our fiscal challenges. But to me, it's an issue of basic safety and common sense. You know, it should be regulated. It will be safer if it's regulated. It's accessible already. Our neighbors are doing it. It would make no sense for us not to do it. I do think that we should take a portion of the revenue generated from the taxation of regulated marijuana and dedicate it to opioid treatment. I think that is a crisis that we all know is a crisis affecting every one of our communities. But at any level of government, despite what Trump talked about during the election, there's no level of government that's adequately addressing that, and I think that's one way to start moving the ball.
I think we're out of time.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Thanks very much. Nice to be here.
Okay, next on the list is Sean Connolly.
Mike, is the alphabet changed?
No, he put it on this list too.
Okay, but B-Y
Okay,
or God?
well, we'll go. Go ahead, Susan, you can go. Next is Susan Weiswitz.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you for your patience, and what a fantastic array of candidates. I applause for the candidates. That's great. So I am from Middletown. I grew up on a beautiful farm there, a potato farm. I love Connecticut. I've raised my 3 children with my husband, David, and I am exploring a run for governor because we desperately need transformational leadership in our state. We need an economy that works for everyone. And I think there's a couple of qualities that are really important in our next governor. We need to have a leader who has elective and government experience, because we've seen what happens in Washington when you send someone to an important role and they have no experience in government. I bring 12 years as Secretary of the State, where I've had the opportunity to register thousands and thousands of voters, to transform our voting system, to make it fairer and more accountable, to register hundreds of thousands of corporations and help many, many small businesses succeed and create thousands of new jobs. I've also bring experience as a business lawyer. So I've spent the last 8 years helping more than 80 companies across Connecticut create thousands of good-paying jobs. And we need a governor that also has private sector experience, because our economy needs to work for everyone, and we need a leader who will bring a vision of what we have to do to get our economy going again, because cutting our way out, taxing our way out won't work. We have to grow our way out. So here just are a few of the ideas that I have to move our economy forward. First, if we hope to move our job creation forward, we have to have a budget that's balanced and passed on time. And we need a governor who will work with our legislature to do that. Second, we need to invest in infrastructure. And I support tolls because if we pass toll legislation, we could bring $60 billion of revenue to invest in our infrastructure, to create good-paying jobs, and to keep our economy going. Also, it is really important that we support small businesses because they are creating the lion's share of the jobs in our state. And I want to leave you with one really important thing that I would do that would uplift every family in our state, and that is to, in addition to the state budget passed on time and balanced, I would put a pay equity bill on the desk of the state legislature and ask them to make that a very top priority, because women in our state still make only 78 cents to every dollar that men make. We need to change our state law to make sure that every family has the opportunity to succeed through that. Finally, we are all Democrats and other people of taste and discernment who have joined us today. We just need to win. This is a critical election, as Senator Duff has said. So we need to put a strong leader at the top of the ticket with a proven record of winning. And I am the only candidate, Democrat or Republican for that matter, looking at this particular office who has run statewide 3 times. And I think that's very important because we have a legislature that could be lost to the Republicans. So it's important that we choose carefully. I look forward to your questions, and I look forward to earning your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Why don't we just get the cannabis question out right now?
So I do support legalization, especially when many of the states around us are moving in that direction. It's a source of $50 million, it's estimated, in revenue. And interestingly, in Colorado, deaths from opioid addiction, where marijuana is legal, have dropped. So from a public health perspective, I think it's really important as well. Yes? Yes, I absolutely do support paid family leave. And I also support health care for everyone. I think we could make a tremendous economic difference for our state if we move in the direction of single payer. It's not something that I think can happen overnight, and I'm agnostic about how to get there, but for instance, I think the legislation that Representative Courtney and Representative Larson have to decrease the age so you can buy into Medicare earlier is important. Senator Murphy's working on a bill at the federal level also to move us in the direction of single payer, and I would fight against the Trump administration to keep the Access Health Connecticut or the Affordable Health Care Act legislation that we have here in place.
Thank you. I think we out of time, Bill? Yes, Bill. We're out of time, but go ahead. As defer to the mayor, former mayor.
Susan, some years ago when you were running maybe for Senate or something, I thought you had a wonderful idea you were proposing. So wonderful I even remember it all these years later. You were proposing a sales tax on financial transactions at about 0.25%, as I recall.
Yep.
Which would make a lot of money in Connecticut and not be a hardship on anyone. I wondered if you're still supporting that as a state law.
So that was a tax on securities transactions, right. And that would have been federal legislation. It would have increased revenue at the federal level. I do have some creative ideas about how to raise revenue at the state level. One is the tolls. That would create $60 billion over 20 years, or $3 billion a year that we could be investing in roads and bridges, creating good jobs, getting our economy going. I also like closing the hedge fund loophole as well, which could create $520 million in revenue a year.
So you're not supporting it for a state tax then?
No, I think that's more appropriate at the federal level. I still think it's a great idea, by the way, and thank you for remembering it.
Okay. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
All set. Next is Sean Connolly. Sean, Commissioner.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Senator Duff. And I am Sean Connolly, and I love Connecticut. Thank you. I hope you all do, too. Well, I am very proud to be here this evening again. Thanks to Senator Duff, thanks to Ed, and thanks to the entire Norwalk DTC for organizing this event today. I'm glad to be here with certainly members of my team, but also a special partner for me, someone who has great energy, great passion, and great compassion for Connecticut and its people. My wife, Carol, a great partner, is here with me as well, so thank you to Carol for being here. So why the heck do you want to do this, Sean? That's what my father, who comes from Ireland 52 years ago this month, asked me just about every day. And for me, it's simple. It's really three reasons. The first is I do love Connecticut. And that's why Carol and I came back here to my home state to raise our two boys, Sean and Brendan, who are 11 and 8 years old right now. Second is opportunity. Carol and I want the same opportunity for Sean and Brendan and all our children, all our grandchildren, no matter who you are, that the last 3 generations of my family enjoy. It's why I'm a Democrat, because I've always believed that being a Democrat was the party of opportunity, the party that gave that hand up to enable everyone to have a great life here in Connecticut and in our nation. And the third is, I know we can do it. I know with the right long-term plan, the right results-driven collaborative leadership working together, we can change the narrative here in our state. We can write the new story of Connecticut opportunity. So my love, it is deeply rooted in my family story. It goes back to the 1940s when my mother's parents had come from Ireland and they got their first jobs. My grandfather, a groundskeeper at Pratt & Whitney in East Hartford. My grandmother, later following at Pratt & Whitney as a factory worker. They worked, they saved, they bought their first house in East Hartford across from the main campus. They found their opportunity right here in Connecticut. My father, the same thing. 52 years ago, January 6th, he arrived from Ireland as well. On a plane this time, not on the boat like my grandparents. But he landed in Logan Airport, and within a couple of days, he had a job in the Hartford area. And within 2 years, he had bought and operated his own small landscaping business, met and married my mom, and bought a house. They found their opportunity here in Connecticut as well. My brother, my sisters, and I, same thing. Growing up in East Hartford, attending public schools, where I had my first job as a dishwasher at 15 at Beefsteak Charlie's on Silver Lane in East Hartford. I did get promoted, though. I was busboy for a little while after that. But we found it here as well. You know, my desire to serve goes back to my days in college when I discovered Army ROTC. I won a scholarship and I started a 20-plus year career as an Army officer, which I continue to do today as an Army Reserve officer, having just graduated from the Army War College. But 2.5 years ago, I had the opportunity to serve once again. This time, I was honored with the appointment as Commissioner of Connecticut's Department of Veterans Affairs, serving 200,000-plus veterans all across our great state. And we were also able to demonstrate efficiency and effectiveness at running a state agency despite our budget going down, despite our resources going down. And we had that success, but despite that success, as I discovered as Commissioner traveling this state, and as I've reaffirmed over the last few months as a candidate, too many people don't believe the opportunity that my family had over the last 3 generations exists anymore. And so we have to do better. And that's why Carol are in this. Carol and I are in this. We're partners. We made the decision together. Because we want to ensure and expand the Connecticut opportunity for everyone, no matter who you are, that fair shot, that fair opportunity right here in Connecticut, no matter who you are. And so I explored for 3 months, but I am a candidate for Governor of Connecticut. I announced on January 9th. And on that same day, because it's so important, because I mentioned it's my first, my second, and my third priority, the state's economy, I released my economic plan. And I hope you'll take a look at it at Connolly4CT.com. It talks about investments in small business, scaling up businesses that already exist. Forget about Amazon. Let's focus on the businesses we have here and grow jobs organically. A competitive and modern infrastructure in our transportation. Anyone been stuck on 95 before? Yeah, the congestion costs us up to $1,000 a year in extra loss of productivity and repairs to our cars. Tax innovation, regulatory modernization, changing the narrative here in Connecticut. We heard it a number of times. We have a great state. We have lots of great things to leverage, and we can do it. And as the governor, I'll be that cheerleader, the cheerleader here in Connecticut and also with the megaphone across our nation, because I believe it's that important. You know, as someone who has not run for office before, I'm not running because it's the next political title that I want or a line in my resume. I'm not running because I'm looking for a forever job in elective office. And I'm not running this time to better position myself for next time. I'm running this time to roll up my sleeves, to jump in the trenches, and to go to work to elevate service over politics for the people of Connecticut, to get our state's economy working again for everyone. I look forward to your questions, and I thank you for having me here this evening.
Thank you, Commissioner. Legalization?
You know, I've said many times in interviews on TV, I'm open to it. I haven't committed to doing it, but as a results-driven leader, as a leader who will make decisions based on data, based on research, and based on evidence, and based on discussion, a collaborative effort, I'm certainly open to it. I want to look at what is the estimated revenue going to be. Like Luke, I don't believe it's a savior for our economy. But I also want to look at what are the potential costs. What are the physical and mental costs that are associated with it? What is the cost of developing an enforcement mechanism to do that? And so we've got to look at both those things and then come to a decision. But I'm open to arriving at that decision together.
Thank you. Time for one more question. Yes, sir.
Would you be in favor of deploying our National Guard to other states, or, for example, Puerto Rico, when the feds have failed?
Sure, absolutely. You know, I'm an Army reservist, so I'm not in the National Guard, but as the Commissioner of Veterans Affairs, I work closely. I went to many send-offs of our men and women in uniform, both on the Army side and the Air National Guard side, to places far and beyond. But certainly, you know, here in Connecticut, we have many folks from Puerto Rico, many family members who live here in our state, and we ought to be a great neighbor and taking care of them as well.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Commissioner. Okay, next up is Mayor Joe Ganim.
Yes to marijuana. To Senate Bill 1 and 2, yes to both of those as well. I don't know that we'll have time to talk about them, but my pleasure to be here, Mayor. Thanks for having us, and I go back long enough to recognize a couple of the other mayors in the room too, so it's a pleasure to join you. Mayor, the job that you're doing is I think, admired by many, as I mentioned, even when I was here last time, around the state. I usually start, as we all do, in some way recognize how much we love Connecticut and why this is so important. I mentioned, and I will tonight, how I've been committed to public service, at least as the job of mayor, for probably collectively some 14 years. And how I think with that, I usually tell you I was 31 or 32 years old when I got elected. Bridgeport was bankrupt. Some of this story is familiar to you. Bad enough where garbage was piling up on the streets, businesses were leaving. There was questions of whether they were even going to cash city paychecks, at least at one point. I took it over, tried with best I could, and worked with people, got people to work together, and we were able to move the city forward, not with just short-term solutions, but some long-term planning over the next 10 years, balanced the budgets without raising taxes, was able to add police, reduce the crime rate in the city to some of its lowest levels in decades, coupled that with community policing, and started one of the first after-school programs, I think, in the nation after Chicago, where we realized that one of the biggest challenges that we have in urban centers, and as we have, I think, in America, is creating opportunities for young people along with a good quality education. By doing that, we saw, but just by keeping the schools open for mentoring till 5 and 6 o'clock at night, a place from the go if they're from a single-parent home, we saw entrance rate crimes like auto thefts drop dramatically, and with that, a correlation to a higher percentage of kids that not only went on to college, but reduced the dropout rates, and so it's a whole education story there. I usually go on and tell you that we were able to spur economic development along our waterfront, bring family entertainment back with a ball team, and then with the arena, start a thing called Steel Point, which ultimately would be built out to a $1 billion development. Senator Duff, when I had more hair, and he still has his, I was in '94, many times in that same car with Senator Larson. I was the party's nominee for lieutenant governor in '94. Look back at that as it was an important year. But as is this. As I continued on as mayor, I think you know too, I made some terrible mistakes. I resigned from office. And upon returning, I had a lot of lessons learned, if you will, Most importantly, at that point, I had to decide if I'd learned those lessons, was it right for me to go back into public service? Did I still have something to offer? And I had to run a litmus test with my now grown 3 children. And as we looked at it, we saw where Bridgeport was. At that time, I made a decision to ask people for a second chance, an opportunity to serve again. And with that, I committed not only to be able to do a good job again and move the city forward again as it deserved and as the residents deserved, this is Connecticut's largest city, but with a greater level of accountability and transparency. And over the last couple of years, if we have time, I'd like to tell you about some of the things we've done, because I think they're important for the context now as to where the state is. And our state, with great leaders like this senator and others in the House and in the Senate, we're still challenged financially in a way that I haven't seen in my lifetime. And I think first and foremost, if we don't commit to putting the state back on track financially, all the things that we want to do, whether it's fund education, continue the commitment to young people, the environment, job growth, are going to sit in the wayside and just be kind of the things that we talked about as candidates during the election. What I've done in that, and then coming back even these past couple of years, is set the budget back in place in Bridgeport and created, in many ways, an opportunity for jobs and for economic development in a way that I think, at least in one instance, is something to talk about. Now, cities are always work in progress. It never ends, morning, night, and the challenges go on. But I will tell you this as Democrats. As Democrats here in Norwalk and those that are from surrounding towns and us all across Connecticut, if we expect the people of the state of Connecticut to give us the keys to the Capitol again after 8 years, looking at where we are now, whether we're to blame or not, we're going to have to get a vision together that shows them that we know what we're talking about, that we want to take this state in the right place, and that we have a track record and experience to back it up. Because what they're seeing out of one eye is, wait a minute, these guys have been in charge for 8 years, not our fault, but look where we are. We know it was a fault from those before us. But telling that story is more than 5 minutes will allow, or frankly, the campaign trail will give us forgiveness on. And they look at Washington, they see the debacle there with electing inexperience and then getting who knows what. Luckily, we have a bit of a firewall in Connecticut with our federal delegation, and I hope with continued Democratic leadership in Senator Duff in the Senate, Senator Looney in the House, and in the governor's office. So there's a lot at stake here. I know you're not here because you didn't have anything to do tonight and because the Grammys were on last night. Oh, this feels like a Grammy microphone, doesn't it? We're here because we care. The mayor cares about his city. He's doing a tremendous job with the new mall. I care about my city, but I care, I think, as we all do collectively, not where it stops at the borders, but for everybody in every city and town. Look at the opioid crisis. Look what that's doing to our state. Look at where we need to stand up on issues. You're not going to get that from the Republican side on the things that are important to us. So am I out of time?
I think so.
Thank you very much. I'm here to answer any questions. Yes.
Taking redistricting out of the state legislature's hands and putting it in non-political people's hands?
You know, I don't know. If we're in control, I have great confidence. But I've seen it manipulated, certainly in Republican years, and I've seen it manipulated in my city. And of course, we've seen it manipulated nationally. So the honest answer is, I don't know. I think if there was a commission set up,
We actually have a bipartisan redistricting commission, and it's the same amount of Democrats and Republicans. It's the way it's always been. So it's actually a fairly fair process, as far as I know.
the one that that's why he's in leadership in the Senate.
Yeah, it's not non-political, but it's fair as far as both Republicans and Democrats.
Connecticut is the second most unequal state in terms of wealth equality. That leaves many members of my generation concerned that the upward mobility that our parents achieved is no longer a reality. How would you address that dynamic?
No question. And I left this out of my answer, and I think it's important to say, and I'll say it emphatically. If we're going to change Connecticut's economy, in my view, again, not to blame for what's happened that hasn't been good, I believe that the new Connecticut economy, or the engine that will drive the new Connecticut economy, lies in our cities. I think it lies in revitalizing our cities even more than we're doing now, recognizing the great traits that we have and investing in them, not just in transportation and infrastructure, but in ways in which young people, as I think they're doing now in many of our cities. I know in Norwalk and Stamford, we're having it in Bridgeport as well, and I'm sure in other cities, to want to come back and live in our cities. So I think that that's a part of it, and we've got that great divide, if you will, between many times urban and suburban can become addressed a little bit better. Look, I'm mayor of the largest city. If you look at the demographics, the economy, it's one of the poorest cities, as a few of our cities are, one of the poorest cities in the country. I get it. I fight every day, and I work as hard as I can. I'm calling up and yelling at the legislature for help all we can get. At the same time, we're going every which way. We're creating some jobs right now. We've got a $400 million investment by a New York company moving into Bridgeport. We'll build some 800 units of new housing, the new tallest building, a new skyline. The buildings that you see, the dilapidated former factory warehouse when you come from beautiful Fairfield, are being renovated now into artist housing with retail on the first floor and educational institution as well. So that process is going on. And I think, at least under me, if I have the honor to serve on a state level, we'll continue that commitment for all of our cities as well. I think that's part of the answer anyway.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Next up is Jonathan Harris. Commissioner.
Leader Duff, thank you. Mayor. It's great to be here back in Norwalk, where I started my law career some 25 years ago at 618 West Avenue, representing small businesses and families. It's been great to be back to campaign with you. Congratulations on your great victory. I'll tell you something. What happened here when we saw the buzz in that headquarters down on Wall Street, that it was, in South Norwalk, that we saw action. And that is actually what is going to help carry us through what will be a tough race to be able to govern. And it's great to be here actually tonight. I was looking, it's the 9th anniversary of the passage of the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, right? That was led by Rosa DeLauro, Jim Himes, our delegation here. That is the type of progressive value, the type of legislation that we as Democrats represent. Now I'm going to answer your question, Leader. It's a great state. We have amazing assets, skilled, educated workforce. We have an international airport. We have diversity. We have tolerance. We're in between two economic engines, New York and Boston. Instead of always trying to be like them, let's connect better into them with infrastructure, with rail, with fiber optics to move people, freight, ideas back and forth. But we also have a very challenged state. Talked about a lot of the issues here tonight. I'll give two more. Friends just called me. They're having problems. They're aging. They don't know how they're going to be able to take care of themselves. They're blessed with a child that's lived longer than they thought, who has a severe disability. They can't find a place for that child to live independently. That is a failure of service delivery. That is not consistent with our progressive values here in the state. I'm here with my son tonight, Spencer, just graduated UConn. Most of his opportunities are outside of Connecticut. There's a problem there that we need to work on. I'll tell you something, though. We can get this done. And you heard a lot of really good stories. We have really good candidates tonight. I am the proven progressive problem solver. I get things done. Whether it was as mayor of West Hartford, as a state senator, as deputy treasurer, as commissioner of consumer protection, or in my private sector law practice and an economic and real estate business that I had. As a matter of fact, I was actually regulated by consumer protection, and then I became the regulator. I've literally seen things from both sides of the desk. And with all of the problems we're talking about, you need someone that's going to be able to hit the ground running on day one. Someone that can work with the legislature, that understands both the people, the policy, the process, how to get things done to bring people together. I've always been able to bring people together and to create practical solutions that are consistent with our progressive values. I'm going to give you, well, one thing that I was thinking about this. I said this the other day.
Jonathan.
So, okay.
No, you can keep, no, wrap it up. Just wrap
okay,
it up.
I'll wrap it up. Well, I won't give you the baseball analogy, but basically, outfielders are taught to go where the ball lands, right? You don't stand still. For too long, our state has stood still. We need to bring that forward-looking vision back and move to where the ball is going to be, where the jobs of today and tomorrow are. I'm going to give you 3 pathways really quickly that we have to attack. 1, we need to focus our budget for core service delivery, the essential services, healthcare, long-term care, education. We need to change and in part of that, reinvent the toxic relationship between our municipalities and our state government. We need a second pathway of economic development that is not top-down, but bottom-up and organic. We did it in West Hartford. That doesn't favor the 1%, it actually favors the entrepreneurs. And finally, our education system. Besides the disparity issue, which we need to deal with, we need to do a better job at creating the curriculum that will train our kids for the jobs of today and for the jobs of tomorrow, and create pipelines, distinct pipelines into those jobs with a public-private partnership. These are the kind of areas, I think, that we have to do and address to go forward. And I'll take questions.
Thank you, sir. Questions? How could I forget?
As the person that actually regulated the medical marijuana program and grew it from about 1,400 patients to 17,000 when I left in April, this is an incredible program. There's over about 23,000 patients now. Went from about 80 physicians that were certifying patients to over 800 now. An expanding program. It is another good healthcare choice, providing a relief for veterans suffering from PTSD, people suffering from cancer, kids seizing multiple times a day, dozens of times a day on epilepsy, hospice. It's also created more and more good jobs, over 240, I believe, good jobs in the state of Connecticut. We are the first state in the nation to actually have a research program. The first research that was done at St. Francis Hospital was to study the use of the medical marijuana to treat severe rib injuries for pain. It is true, medical marijuana has bent down the curve of the prescribing of opioids and painkillers. So it is another tool in our kit to address the opioid epidemic. So I understand how to regulate it. We see other examples in states. And what I would say is yes, the time is here to actually legalize it. But we shouldn't do it because it's going to throw off a bunch of revenue. You should do it because it's good public policy. It is going to be, it is in Massachusetts, it will be in Rhode Island and New York, it will be everywhere. So we need to figure out in a thoughtful and a deliberate way, like we grew the medical program, to regulate it. We have to take into account the cost of regulation. As a former commissioner, it takes people to regulate. There's a cost there. We have to take into account the social costs, and then that revenue will be a benefit whether it goes to education or healthcare or otherwise.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Cannabis again?
One of the issues states have had, for the record, I'm a criminal defense.
Plus, by the way, when you do talk about disparities in the criminal justice system connected with marijuana, that's a big piece. And it's really time that we start, not just with marijuana, but just in general, treating drug addiction as a healthcare problem, not as a criminal problem. Counselor?
One of the issues states that have legalized it have had is that it turns into an all-cash business because they can't bank.
Yep.
Having been a consumer regulator, do you think there's a place for the state to maybe have a bank or some way for these companies to deposit this money so it stops being all-cash transactions?
Yeah, we actually worked a little on that. There was some access through some banks, but the fees were high, credit unions. The cash part, it's a safety concern and economic concern too. There are some products that are being developed for third-party payers that actually are pretty creative in how they deal with federal banking law to be able to allow credit transactions, debit card transactions. We should pick up on that. But the big question we have now is, Jeff Sessions, right? And getting rid of the Cole memo. And now it appears that not only might the feds come after legalized marijuana, but there is somewhat of a threat to the medical program. So we have to be very careful at how we do this to keep it away from the Neanderthal attitude of the federal government when it comes to cannabis.
Okay, I think we're all done. Thank you. Commissioner? We also had, before Ned Lamont comes up, we had Mark Stewart Greenstein invited as well. I don't think he is here, but every candidate was invited. Before Ned comes up, just want to also thank thank our town chair, Ed Camacho, and thank him for organizing and putting this together. And now we have Ned Lamont. Please come on up, sir.
All right, so Jonathan went with the baseball analogy. I know you're thinking that Coach Duff has me batting ninth. I like to think of it as cleanup. And I also want to thank you guys for your stamina. You've lasted a long time this evening, and your work is not yet over. Because over the next 3 or 4 months, you're going to have to figure out for yourselves which of these candidates, you've heard us all, a little American Idol style, gives us, the Democrats, the best chance to beat the Republicans in November, and who has the executive experience to govern this state going forward during some pretty turbulent times. And I think first off, you got to think about, as Bob phrased it, what type of a state are we? Look, this is a state, and your governor is going to represent not Trump values, but Connecticut values. We celebrate our diversity. We welcome people from a variety of different backgrounds, wherever they come from. We're stronger for it. And yes, I'm going to be a champion of women. I don't know why they need a champion, because they are generally more highly educated in high school, 40% more likely to go to college, much more likely to have a master's degree, and still earning less. I'll be a champion for women because that's what the state needs. And guys, come on, step it up. You got to compete here. I will also tell you that I will be a champion for this state, and I will be a cheerleader for this state. And no more of our businesses bad-mouthing the state of Connecticut. We're going to get on board, and we're going to do everything we can to attract businesses to this state, start growing this economy in a fair way. Yes, a $15 minimum wage. A $15 minimum wage doesn't just raise the minimum wage, but raises wages for everybody. And affordable health care for all. Those are the 2 key pillars of human rights that we have. Who do you need to win? Okay, well, the insiders generally say, well, I think we need an insider. So you won't be surprised to hear me say, I think you need somebody who's not been too closely tied with the Hartford scene over the last 5, 10, 15 years. I think you need somebody who will give this state a fresh start. And I'll tell you, Bob, I think that's the best way that our House and Senate stays democratic and grows, by saying we're not the party of the status quo, we are the party of change. And that is what I've done my whole life. I had a business, you know, we took on the big cable utilities many years ago, and we beat them on price, we beat them on service, and that's what we've got to do in terms of the state of Connecticut. More efficient, better service for all of our people, we can do that. You know, I think some of you remember that I'm not afraid, you know, stand up to the status quo, even in my own party. And it was many years ago that I took on Joe Lieberman, and I took on George W. Bush, and I took on the Democratic establishment, I took on the Republican establishment. We stood up, opposed to the war in Iraq, and we stood up for our progressive values, and a lot of people said, oh, don't do that. You're jeopardizing a safe seat. We had the biggest turnout in the history of Democratic primaries for standing up for what we believe, and we have to start standing up now for the state of Connecticut. As your governor, I will take questions.
Thank you, sir. Cannabis.
All right, let me just answer these questions really fast. Legalize weed. Mass incarceration is over. It's a national and statewide embarrassment and costs us a fortune. Give these people a new opportunity, a second chance. One way we'll do that is by putting in the work, rebuilding the tired old infrastructure and transportation infrastructure of this state, including electronic tolling, representing billions of dollars in great paying jobs and a new start for more and more of our folks. Here, I took care of 3 of them.
That was a lot of them, yeah.
But
Yes.
how would you get rid of mass incarceration? It's a kind of federal institutional, it's, you know, systemic, institutional, federal. You can't just wave a magic wand and get rid of mass incarceration, right?
I work with Murphy, I work with Blumenthal, I work with the Department of Corrections, I work for the Second Chance, I find alternatives to incarceration, I give all those folks who have been incarcerated for low-level drug crimes, which is, you know, racist and wrong, and I give them a better opportunity, a halfway opportunity. I think if the governor takes the lead, we can make a big difference there. I'm not going to hide behind federal regulations.
And one more question?
Oh, come on, give me one more. I waited so long.
How about
yes, thank you.
Pat.
What will you do to make the climate in Connecticut more favorable to small business growth?
The question is about climate change. Well, one...
Climate change for small businesses.
The economic climate.
For small business.
Oh, sorry, okay, I was jumping ahead there. Look, I come out of small business. Let me tell you what we don't want. I don't want a handout, I don't want a credit, I don't want to, I'll pay a little bit if you add on a wing. That's not what big business or small business wants. You know what they want, and I'm part of that world, and I talk to them every day. For the last 5 years, I've been at Central Connecticut State, working with business and labor, trying to get them looking forward to what we ought to do. They want our state to get its act together. They want us to have an honest budget that is structurally sound, that's on time, so they can budget accordingly. They want us to do our job when it comes to transportation. They don't expect us to solve it today or tomorrow, but they want us to start, and they want to see a 10-year plan so they know that their employees are not stuck in gridlock trying to get to the office. And they want us to invest in an education system that is the best in the world. Pre-K, after-school activity, making sure our young people are prepared for the 21st century jobs. So that electric boat and travelers don't have to go out of state for those jobs. Those folks are right here ready to work. That's what business wants. That's what our economic development plan is. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Appreciate the
Thank you very much.